Today we're going to take a look at MacroView corporate email filing, which is an optional and very powerful feature of MacroView message and MacroView DMF. And it can significantly improve your sort of productivity and compliance when it comes to saving sort of important business emails. So just before we start, I'll introduce myself. My name's Colin Titmus. I'm the CEO here at MacroView and former product director. I've been with MacroView since 2015, and a passion of mine is really delivering good software that businesses need, but at the same time is that the end users want. Right? So it makes it that's attractive to end users to use. So you get a win on both fronts, and it makes the topic today particularly of interest to me, one of my favourites, because it achieves both very well. Right, it helps with compliance, but users really don't have to do much additional effort, if any. Joining me today, I've got Anita. Anita's our marketing specialist, and she'll be looking out for any questions and things you have throughout the session. So if you have those, just pop them in the chat panel, and she'll collate those, and we'll address those in a question and answer session towards the end of the presentation. So I just want to start by pointing out this webinar is going to be aimed to teach you a couple of things. First of all, how to assess your current or proposed environment and its suitability for CEF and the types of rules that it can support, but also how to actually get in and create, test and deploy those rules, and provide some troubleshooting advice as well. So a majority of the content, the latter part of the content will actually be quite technical. So if you're brand new to CEF, we'll be sort of getting in under the covers a little bit. But it's I look forward to showing you that. So I'm just going to quickly pop up an agenda to talk about what we're going to go through. I'll just pop my camera off now too as I go through this. And I'm just going to start the recording. We'll be recording this session. So, it's already been recorded.
I'm already recording.
Thank you, Anita. On the ball. Good. Okay. So what I'm going to go through, first of all, as I said, some of you may have used or be quite familiar with corporate email filing. So I'll give a bit of an overview, though, for those that are maybe less familiar with it, to give you an idea of, show you what it can do and how it can work with the different types of rule. We'll talk about best practice. So we'll talk about the structure and what the considerations and for different types of rules, or for considerations when designing a structure if you want to use corporate email filing. Then we're going to get in and do the testing, deploying, touched on troubleshooting, Q&A at the end, and when we're finished, we'll provide some information, some links to where you can get more information, and the session will take about an hour, but will be recorded as well, and sent to you so that you can revisit anything you might have missed along the way. All right, so we've got a fair bit to cover, so I'm going to crack on. All right, the corporate email filing. What I'm going to do first is give you just a quick mini demonstration. It won't be, it's not extensive, but it will show you DMF working. It will show you. Excuse me for one moment. I won't apologize. I'll just right. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm just going to jump across to my Outlook window, and we'll just show you sort of CEF in action first. But the area I'm going to work on for the purpose of this demonstration is I've got a single site I'm going to be working in, but I've got a number of different structures under here to show you the different rule types. So CEF or for those not yet familiar with MacroView, when it's installed, you'll get this nice tree view structure of your SharePoint environment on the right-hand side. So I can navigate my SharePoint environment. Now, I've already set up some rules, so I'm just going to show you that each of the sort of rules working and what the user experience would be. So first of all, I'm going to start with a very basic rule. We've got three types of rule. The very first one is really just a conditional rule. It's very much like an Outlook rule. If it meets this condition, save to this specific location. So the example I've got here, a user might be creating a new email. They're going to, I'll send this email across to Anita. So I've got a rule here that says if I receive an email from Anita, to save it to a particular folder. So I'll send that email off and await a reply. I'll jump on now and look at another way I could have send an email as well. A second type of rule is one that actually uses a tag. So both there's two other types of rule. They both use tags in the subject of the email that will associate with a location in SharePoint so that all emails on that conversation thread are automatically saved. In this case here, so you can see Anita's replied to that email. It's come into my inbox. It's already been marked as saved to SharePoint. I haven't even read it yet. But if I was to pop over here, because that rule I had set up to say is if it comes from Anita, to save it into this confidential folder, and there's that folder. There's the email saved with all its metadata automatically. So very much like an Outlook rule. The next one, the tag-based rule, means that when I'm working in a particular location in my structure, I might be in this particular project, 111, and I click here. I can create new emails a number of ways. So I can actually just sort of say I want to use this new button and do a new email. And the email that is initiated, I'll send these ones to myself. So we can see I've got a rule here that says to save both incoming and outcoming emails where this tag is recognized. So this email here, I'll just put some text in that. So I'm sending an email, and I send that email because I generated it from this particular location. It's been tagged with something that says where it belongs, and that email will head out. So if I go to Outlook and look at go to my sent items, you can see an item I just sent there. It had the tag on it, and it's already been saved to SharePoint. I send it to myself, so this could be a reply from a client. You can see it's also hit my inbox, and that's been saved as well. So as long as that subject is in the email, as long as that tag is in the email subject, the continuation of that conversation will automatically save to the associated location. So if I pop over here now, I should see both the email I sent out and the email that was received. In this case, to me, it could have been from someone else. And the other ways you might get a tag on. So the key thing is getting the tag on. If I do a brand new email in Outlook, I'll start in Outlook and do a new email. I'll send myself an email here. I might want to do another email here, and I might be constructing an email in Outlook and I want to associate it with a particular location. I can just say insert a tag. I can pick from tags that I've just recently used. Or I can go and nominate another location through my thing here. I might do it to this second project this time. You can see the tag it's going to get up here. It's building the information that tells me where that is in that tag, and I say OK to insert that tag. So now when I send that email, it's been associated with that particular location. And all replies, forwards, those sorts of things will automatically save. So the two other scenarios, so if I'm now working away, I may also be on my inbox here and say, look, I've got another email here that's come in from a client, this one here. but it hasn't been tagged, but I know it's associated with, I want to associate it with that project so that future correspondence is automatic. I can just select one or more emails here, insert a tag, and I can go and pick once again a recently defined one. There's that one with the 222. I'll just use that number again, and that email will now have a tag added to it and also be saved. So now when I work from Outlook by opening it here, it's already got that tag on it. So any forward or reply will automatically save as well. So the difference with these rules, though, is very much that, so once the tag's on, it will save automatically, but these rules are not individually set. They're sort of set more as a policy by centrally. And you'll notice, obviously, they're marked as saved to SharePoint here, and they're also categories to tell you where it's been saved. So it's it's a tagging system. So what I'll just pop back to now, is just to quickly touch on that before we get into then actually sort of building some of these rules and showing how or talking about your structure and building the rules. So it's automatic filing of emails to SharePoint. It's a complementary or optional module that goes with MacroView's message and DMF product. It can save to anywhere in SharePoint. That could be Microsoft Teams or a OneDrive area. It's just that your rules can be defined to work in any of those spots. One of the key differences here to personal rules and your normal Outlook rules is they're not individual. So this is more rules are defined in a central location and then are applied. So other than putting a tag on a brand new email or associate the tags, most of the stuff is automatic. The user doesn't have to think about it, or just apply automatically. I mentioned there's 3 types of rules, and we're going to look at all of those, particularly the tag ones today. The rules are able to recognize tracking tags in subjects or other email properties, to, from, etc. I gave that example where there was a email from Anita that automatically saved. The beauty of these tag rules, though, is that you don't need to have write new rules when you create new locations, because these tag rules sort of are designed to recognize a particular pattern or structure, and therefore, as you create new structure, as long as they comply to that pattern, they will immediately start to work. And for the same reason, you can sort of get to an unlimited number of locations as well. So we'll talk a little bit about now those 3 rules and what you want to consider in terms of your environment. So the first one I mentioned was a conditional rule. And these are pretty straightforward. We create a rule. As I said, we can map it to whether multiple properties. We can use to, from, BCC, subject, etc., just like in Outlook, and then we point it at a specific location. So the thing that structure is not too important with these types of rules, because each rule has a condition and a specific location you're going to save to. So there's no real structure dependencies. However, you do need a new rule for each new location. So and ideally, we recommend a smaller number of rules, because those rules have to be processed when emails arrive. So it's the tag type rules are far more powerful, because a single rule can handle any number of locations. So that's the first of them. The second one, all these are tag rules, but there's 2 types of tag rules. This first one we call tag rules, and what they do is they contain a tag in the subject. Here's an example of one we spoke about, and the tag contains enough information to construct the save location. So in this example, we've got a part of the tag that's telling us it's to go to the residential site. We've got another component of the tag telling it which one of these libraries to go to. We want the AE library. And then we've got a component of the tag that's telling us we want to go to the folder starting with that number. So we're building up the structure there. Now, if your rule was, if you only had one site collection where rules were going to apply, then obviously you wouldn't need the RES part. That could be just hard coded into your rule. But wherever you want it to be able to be variable, you would have components in the tag. You might want to add another library for, S to Z. So you would need to know. You can see with these tags, where this is useful is where the two different areas can both have the same number. So both these areas have a folder or project that starts with 1111 as your number. Now, if we only had 111 in that tag, we're not going to know which one of these folders to use. Right? So we're assembling the structure, and this is a pretty common type of rule that's been used. The key bit to these, though, is that it's a consistent URL structure is necessary. So just as an example of that on the URL side of things, if you're considering your design, if you look at that same example we've got over here, if you construct your URLs using very full, long descriptive names, for instance, residential, the whole project's AE, and then your project number, in order to create a tag that can reconstruct that URL, you're going to need to have a tag that contains all of that long description, so it can be a bit wieldy. So good practice there is good practice on your URLs is to sort of use short codes and numbers. Your display will be no different because your display names can still be full text, but in your URL, you're going to use short codes, etc. So in my example here, each of the sites might have a number. It doesn't have to be a number. That's just the example I've given. We might use just the short start finish letter for the library. So now you can see I can have a much more concise code, though it can still get fairly long depending on how deep your structure is, because you can have any number of levels. In this example, I'm only dealing with a couple of levels, but you can have many. The next type, so a couple of tips, right? So I was just saying, avoid the long descriptions, use short codes. When you get to folders where you put the numbers at the beginning, what we're trying to do is build up that URL to this point here to find the location. And I mentioned before, these rules are very good because they help you avoid having to build lots and lots of rules. The smaller number of rules you have, the quicker it'll be for processing. And a single rule, as long as these variables stay the same, can handle it. So the next type I want to talk about, and these are newer ones we've introduced, and these are becoming more and more popular, particularly because they can have nice short tags. Property match tags. So property match rules still rely on a tag in the subject of the email. The difference is that we're assuming that the number in that tag is unique. So if you're in an environment where, if you look at our example here, you have a number for your project or folder, but that number is unique. So in a different area of your structure, you won't get the same number. Right? The numbering is different. There's only one. Then you can get away with just having just that number in the tag, because we can identify the one and only place where that could go. A consistent URL structure is not so important there. It's still, as we get into creating a rule in a minute, you'll see how you can how having a consistent structure can still help you sort of be more targeted with your saves, but it's not imperative because we already have a unique location for that number. but the key part is the property is unique. Now, in the example I've got here, we're using a number in the folder, but that could be the property, a property on a document set. It could be a project number or anything else that might actually be just a property of that location. So a quick look at its rules in terms of best practice and the difference here is if I look at this structure, if I was using a URL structure here, in this case, it doesn't matter that I'm using long descriptive URLs because I'm not going to be using that in the tag. But if in both the Adelaide and Brisbane area, I was using the same project number, there'd be a problem because my tag that just has that number in it won't know which one of those to use. Where your structure is ensuring that, as I mentioned, that the number has to be different in each location, it's all right because a different tag is required to find each of those locations. All right, same sort of tips there, though. The key bit here being that it's a unique identifier, and it could be a title or another property. It could be part of your document set. And at the same time, we use, if we're using codes in the title of the folder or document set, they're best to be used at the beginning. And the same thing about rules. So there's a little bit about best practice, and we can come back to those. But I think as we start to build rules, and then we'll go on now to sort of building some rules, and you'll probably become a little clearer seeing how those work when we actually create each of those sort of rules we're playing with earlier, and see how they apply. Right, so at this point here, I just want to jump back into the desktop and show you how we start creating rules. All right. I'm going to jump back now into a little desktop application called the Ceph Rule Builder that is a free download that you can get from our help center. So you just download this, and this is the little tool used to create the rules files. It's a single file. It contains each of your rules, and I'll show you how to deploy that in a moment. So we're just going to start first of all by creating that conditional rule, the one for Anita. So we fire up our Ceph Rule Builder, and we're going to create a brand new rule. We want to give that rule a name. Okay. A few mouse problems. All right. So right. So first step, we give the rule a name. So if it's an email comes from Anita, I want to save it to a particular folder. It only makes sense in this case to have it for incoming emails, not both incoming and outgoing. I can turn the rule off in my rules file temporarily if I need to as an administrator, but I'll leave this one on. And then we're going to specify the save path, which I can either most easily get by coming back to our application, picking the folder that I want it to go to. Let's do this confidential folder here, and doing. I'll copy as a link, but you could get that link from anywhere else. And I put that in as where I want it to save. So this is a direct, condition I want to save here. So now we just expand this condition area to say, well, under what condition do we want to to do that? And we set that condition here with a number of parameters, whether they're case sensitive, etc. What I want to, the match type I want to do, whether it's any of these words, all of these words. In this case, I might want to do a from, and I'll put in, say, an email address, and it's going to be my from field. And it's as simple as that. It's just very much like Outlook. So I'm just going to save this file now. I'll save it here and call it my rules. So we've actually got a. So there's that's a very straightforward rule. So what I'll do, I'll create a couple of rules in this file, and then we'll go and test them all. So that's a straight condition rule. The next rule I want to talk about is the straight tag rule. So I'm going to create another rule. I'll just hit plus here. Under this rule, I will give it a name as well. And this is one where I want to construct the user tag that I'm going to use the tag to build the parts of the URL. So in this particular case, we'll make it a both for incoming and outgoing emails. Now I've got to build up this save path, and this is where it gets a little tricky because we've now got to put some variable elements in it. So with this sort of rule, I find the best way is to work backwards. So we'll leave the save path for the moment, and we'll come down to the connect condition section, and I don't want one of these standard conditions, so I'll just get rid of that. I'll delete that condition, but I'm going to add a tag rule condition. And you can also, you then will get a testing area, which I'll also expand here. So working backwards, I normally start by saying, well, let's get hold of an area an example of where I would like to save. So if I pop back into my Outlook, and we're going to do we're going to use this particular folder as an example. This structure where we're using one of the libraries. And I can use any of these folders. I just need one that's an example. So I'm just going to right click, copy as link, pop back to the rules editor, and I'll put in the URL that I want to test, that I want to use for based on my test. If the spanner comes up, you can just clear that so that you get rid of the escape characters. The next thing I also then want to do is sort of put in a tag format. So I think about what my tag might want my tag to look like, and this is sort of, you can use this as an example. So I'm going to put in, I'll put in MY as an example, just a little prefix, a hard-coded prefix to distinguish my tags from another organization's tags, for instance, right? So it's good practice. I then want to use a code that's going to tell me a 2-letter code for the library that I want to go to, and a 4-letter code for the folder that I want to go to. And that's the format that I'm going to try and build here. So now let's go back and start to rebuild this structure. So the save path is up here. So I want to save to this location. And up until that point in the save location, it's static, right? It's fixed. It's only the AE that starts to change, because I could be wanting to go to the the F to Z or F to P library, but the save path will always start with that component. So I'll just put this component up here at the moment in the save path, and then we want to use our first variable. So these green parts are variables. So what I'm going to do is change this group name here. Excuse me. And I'll just call this, let's call it just call it group. So I'll give that a name, and you can see in the URL I'm going to substitute in group there. And what is the group in my URL? It's a 2-character, it's 2 letters. So what I do here is put in some regular expression. I'm going to show you where you can find those regular expressions and give you some samples later on as well. But I just want it to be a letter, an uppercase letter between A and Z. I want there to be 2 of them. It has to be 2 characters. So that's the first variable, and then below that, I now want to be able to find my project number. So I need another variable here. I'll hit another one, and we'll just call this one project number. Give it whatever name you like. And the project number we're saying is always a 4-digit number. So I'm going to say it's somewhere between 0 and 9. And I want it always to be 4 of them. Could be 5, could be depending on your design. And then I've now defined that much of the save path up here. And then at the end, because once I get to the folder, there could be free text on the end, and I don't know what that will be. So now's where I can start I put in some other regex, and you can put, excuse me, you can put at the end of this URL, after the project number, I want it to have some random text. And once I said, the tricky part about these rules is understanding regex, but I'll give you some, as I said, I'll give you some reference material for that to refer to. So what I'm putting there is saying after the project number, this effectively is saying put any characters any number of times except for a slash, except for a slash that's a divider. So once I've defined that save path, you'll notice immediately that what it's saying is that this URL here, this sample URL, has now gone green, because it's actually it's highlighting that yes, I actually comply to that format. You can see that if this had only a 3-digit number, it's no longer a match, because we've said up here that it had to be 4 digits. All right, so that's the match. So the next thing we need to do, so that's the save path works, but we've now got to get the tag looking like we wanted it to look. We want it to have a prefix at the beginning for my. So we go up here and we put in after, I'm going to put square brackets around it, put a my dash. Then we want the group number. I'll get rid of that text there. I'll put another dash. And then at the end, I want to put another square bracket. So this is where you're playing with the tag format. And now you can see that both those match. So when you're playing with this sort of rule, unless I can get both of these things go to green, my rule's not going to work. But once I've now defined it that way with those components, any URL I use, even if I put B to Q there, you can see it's just going to change what tag that would generate. And if I was to test the tag and call it, T to Z, that tag complies as well. This is where, so you're testing down here to make sure it's okay. And once you've done that, we can now save this rule as well. So I'll just save that file and save it over the top of my rules file. So fairly tricky, but the rules builder is a very useful thing. One, because you can do that testing, but also it takes care of any little errors in syntax and things you might do. So I definitely encourage you to use this to build your rule. Now I could keep writing more rules. I could have different rules with a different tag format for other areas. What I'll do though now is create one more rule, so that we've created one of each of the types of rules. And then we will go and deploy these and give them a test to show them working. So I'll add a third rule. And this one here, I will just want to use a project number, because I know that project number is unique on the folders. So I'll give the rule a name, same practice, enabled. I want this one to be both incoming and outcoming. I now want to pick a sample of the save path again. So I'll pop back here. This time, you recall we were looking at these Adelaide, Brisbane ones where they have a different number in different areas. So I'm just going to pick one of these folders as my one of these as my example. Pop back to the builder, and we're going to, I'll put that save path in. Once again, I don't want the standard condition, so I'm going to get rid of that condition. but now I want to do what we call a property match condition. So a bit like the tag, it's another, still needed a tag, so we're still going to have a tag format, and we're still going to have some variables. So let's change the variable and call it project number. So you can call these whatever you like. They're not seen to the user. They're just your way of describing what component that represents. And let's, in this case, we'll make that rule any 5 characters, a 5-digit number. Looking up here, we can see we're using 5-digit numbers. So I'm just going to look for a project number which is made up of 5 digits. Now it could be 2 letters and 5 numbers, yeah, but that will come down to what the regex we use to define that pattern, which I'll show you. So now, if I can find, I want to find a unique project number, and I also like my tag. Once again, good practice to put a prefix. I'll just call it PR for project. You know, something that makes it potentially unique. If you wanted to, you could put, you know, you can put a business prefix that's just hard coded in the tag. But I'll just leave it at PR for this sample. And then the next thing we're going to say, so what is it that what is the object that we're trying to match on? So in this case, we're trying to match on a folder, and I would like to match on the title of the folder. And what I want it to match is the project number. Now, if this was a document set, you might have an internal, you might have a field instead. We put an internal column name for your field, or for your property, and you can then look for that instead. So now I've sort of said here, look for a 5-digit number in the title of a folder, and the save path is here, once again, is consistent to this point, to where we get to CDS. But after that, we don't know this part of the structure. The only thing we know is that there's a unique the number, because that could be that could be the Adelaide, the Brisbane, the other folders as well. So we get the consistent part of our path. We say we know that much, and then we'll put an asterisk to say start at that point, and then below that point, I want you to find this unique number. The 5-digit number that matches what's in my tag, and that's where I want you to save. What we will do here as well, I mentioned, I think earlier, that I'll just do save on that rule, so that's been saved as well. And provided that a 5-digit number is unique under that URL, it will find, we can now, in the folder title, it will find it. But I mentioned earlier that you might want, you know, in this sort of rule, that structure is optional. So if you look at this structure we're trying to save to here, this example Brisbane Adelaide, I know that the project number is always one level down from the city here, or the library. The issue, what would an example of what would happen if someone came along and underneath here, as an end user, created a new folder and called it 20345, ABC, which they could do. We're now back to that problem that if we're searching for a folder starting with 20345, how do I know which one I'm expected to use, because we wanted to use this one? So what we do with that, we can actually specify at what level, how many levels down that can be. So we could just say here it has to be 2 levels down from that. So the folder we're basically substituting for one level in the URL, the Adelaide Brisbane level, and then it has to be at that next level. So it won't work at the 3rd level. Right? So we can put that's actually probably a good practice to sort of, if you've got some sort of structure. But if you do have your things scattered where your folders are at different levels, then you just don't use the number. You set it to where it's static, and then hit the prefix. So I'm just going to save that email, save that rule, which I think I did already. I think it's time to go and actually have a look at these rules working. Where are we going for time? Okay. All right. So let's deploy the rules. I'll close this down. I'm going to just 1 second. Right. So going back to our SharePoint environment, the way these rules are deployed is the rules reside, that file that we've just created resides centrally in your SharePoint environment where people can access it and it can read it to get those rules. So I've got a folder set up here where I'm storing my Ceph rules. What I'm going to do now is just drag and drop that file. There's the My Rules file I just saved. I'm going to drag and drop that up into here. And if I was testing this, it's a good practice to sort of use a different file name. Once you're happy with all these rules, you could override the one that everyone's using to deploy them to everyone else. So I've now uploaded that file. The next thing I need to do, excuse me, is under our MacroView tab here, look at our email filing rules button. And this is where you can define your filing rules. There's personal ones here. Today we're talking about the corporate filing rules. So if you go to this tab here, the user can see the rules that are applied, but they can't edit or change them. But I'm actually going to go and select a different file to be my rules file, right? So I'll open here and I'll just remember where I last was. I'll just go and select that My Rules file that we just uploaded, and it's okay. So now you'll see those rules match what I've just said. You know, there's the rule I made for Anita's emails that are incoming. I had the my prefix I put on this one, and there's the third one we've created as well. A couple of settings you can apply to your rules. First of all, you can override, turn the whole lot on or off. You can lock that down as an administrator if you don't want users to be able to do that. And this one here is you can make it so that, you know, once it matches a rule, stop. Otherwise, keep processing all rules. So, because I've got a few different rules I want to run here, I'm going to leave it on all of them. So I now say OK. And once I'm pointing my message or DMF at that file, those rules will now apply when I are using Outlook. So let's just give each of those a quick test to see how that's working. I'll come back here into my inbox. I'll go to and create a new message. I want to insert a tag. And now if I go to my test areas and I pick under this residential area, well, let's start first of all by doing one that was in the SZ area, and it was project number 222. So you can see up here already my tag that I've defined is going to contains those components. That's the tag that it will get. I'll say OK, and now that tag is on the email. So I'll just send this off to myself. I'll also, while I'm here, just send a new email to Anita, because to test the other rule, obviously you can't test inserting a tag. So I'll just send that to Anita. My rule wasn't to apply on an outgoing email, only on incoming. So we'll see what happens when that email comes back. And then let me just do the third one, and I'll do that one of the other ways, as if I was to go here in our structure, and this time I'm going to go to a unique project. I'll just go to this Supercenter one, and I'll hit new email. You see the tag has already been put in for PR20347, which corresponds with the folder that I've put in. All right, so we just don't break the tag. Okay, and I can send that one off as well. So I'm using those rules, and they should be applying as I'm working. If I go to my sent items, you'll see that emails that I have, 2 emails I sent out. There's that one there with that tag. It's been saved. So is the one for my project. The outgoing one for Anita hasn't. If I come back to my inbox, you'll see the reply from Anita has, as have the 2 that have got tags. So even without reading them, if I now go across to say this Supercenter area, and I'll just look at the emails view, those emails have already been saved. And those, as will any replies and things on that thread while that tag remains. If I go to my confidential folder, I should see the trial email that just came back from Anita. And under this SZ area, I think it was the 222 project. Once again, there is my trial email, right? So those rules are there. It can be a little tricky to write, but the rules editor, once you get used to it, will allow you to very easily construct those rules. And the type of rule, tag rule you'll want will depend on your structure, and whether you have very unique numbers for every project, or whether you need to assemble a unique number based on a number of different criteria. Right. All right. Well, look, I'm just looking at the time now. I just want to very quickly give some troubleshooting tips as well, things to look out for, and then we will have a bit of a question and answer. So when troubleshooting, there's 2 different types of things, 2 different scenarios that are fairly common when troubleshooting, or 2 types of clues to what sort of problem you have. First of all, it's when you get no Outlook category. So when you're not seeing the yellow tag go on the emails at all, so emails, and your emails are not being saved. The the things to look out for here, first of all, obviously you need to have the Ceph module licensed and enabled on the dialog, and I'll show you that. We need to check that your rule is valid. It generally will be if you've used the rules editor, but if you tried to just edit the file, because it is just a file, you can edit the file directly, then you may corrupt the syntax. And I'll just, actually what I'll do is just Alt Tab. So if I just pop across to here again, here's where I put that rules file. If I open that rules file, you'll see that it is just a text or XML file that contains a few lines for a rule. So a rule is only this long. That's the one that's saying to go to Anita. Here's the next rule that was for using a project code and a group code to build the URL. But you can see there's a little bit of syntax in here. So if you're not familiar with this stuff, it's very easy for you to corrupt this file, and why I encourage you to use the rules editor. If I just go to my filing rules dialog, if you're not licensed or the file is corrupt, you won't see the rules here. You'll see a message to that effect. So that's one of your first troubleshooting steps, is to come in here and see that you're licensed and that that the file isn't corrupt, and also that it's been enabled. What else are we looking for when you're not seeing emails being saved? Obviously, make sure you're pointing at the correct rules file. If the rule doesn't, they're using the file that actually contains the rule you're expecting. And and then that the rule's correctly defined. So you might want to either go back into the Ceph rule builder and retest it. It could just simply be not the syntax as such, but that you've defined the rule incorrectly and it's not matching what you thought it would. The best way I find to test these rules, test and find out whether a rule I've written is working, particularly when it's a tag-based rule, is to actually start a new, start a new email, simply start a new email, and then try the insert tag function and go and pick the locations where you would expect that tag to apply. Because, and if you can see the tag up here, then you know that your rule is okay because it's a match. If you don't see the tag up here, then, and the button will be grayed out as well, you won't actually be able, you'll sort of know there's something wrong with your rule. Right? That your rule doesn't. So there's, for instance, in that location there, it doesn't match my rule because even though it has that project number, it's now not at, it's not 2 levels down, it's 3 levels down, so it won't work. I can't insert a tag. So that's a good test, and you can test that immediately because it doesn't sort of rely on any search index or anything. So just Alt Tab across here, and next, so I've said you should test it in the rules builder again, and then if all else fails, capture a trace file, which you can just do in MacroView by going into the MacroView options, go to support. You can turn this at information level, and that will then generate, and you can open the folder where the trace file will get generated, and then when you apply that rule, it'll capture a whole lot of information about that rule and what's applying. So you can send that through to support for us to sort of help identify why it's not working. Or you might try and read that file yourself, but it will sort of highlight where a rule may be failing. Don't leave this on information level though. We recommend you leave it on exception. All right, so troubleshooting. That's if you're seeing a rule not save at all. The other one that is actually quite common is where the rule is defined correctly, but the email is not being saved. And you'll see this blue not auto file category. I'll pop back to Outlook again. If I go to my inbox, you'll see I've got one probably sitting here. Down here, there's one just down here at the moment that says not auto filed instead of. So if you're getting a blue not auto file tag on your email, well, first of all, the good news is your rule is being recognized because Ceph has sort of recognized the tag, said, yes, that is a valid tag. It does match my rule. However, when I went to try and save the email, I was unable to do so for some reason, right? And it's a different type of troubleshooting now, is to look at why that might be the case. And there's a number of reasons to that here. First of all, your search index. So if you've just created a brand new area, Ceph relies on, once it's started to build a component of the URL, it then uses search to find the matching location. So it requires that your search index is up to date. And what's most common is when people create a brand new area, it can be a few minutes, 2, 3, 4 minutes or so before the search index on SharePoint Online completes. So it might just take a small amount of time before that location will work. And if it can't find the location, therefore it puts a blue tag on it. Another very common reason is that the area we're trying to save to requires a profiling dialog. So you can't have emails saving automatically in the background if they've got to throw up dialogues in front of the user. Otherwise you'd be working in Outlook and all of a sudden dialogues would suddenly start popping up. So if there's a profiling dialog, or the dialog has to be displayed for any reason, it might be because you've got a few email content types defined and it needs to know which one to use. It will, because it's got to throw up a dialog, it will just say, look, I can't do this now. I'll just let you know that it did match a rule, but you'll have to sort out the issue first or save it later. Obviously, not all users might have permissions to the area where that rule points to. So if you don't have rule permissions or perhaps connectivity, the rule can't find the location. So it says, I'll just mark and let you know that I couldn't save it. And there's a couple of settings you need to be aware of too. There's one called don't override existing settings. You need to make sure that's checked. If you don't have that checked, what you're saying is every time I save an email, save a new version. And obviously, and when you save a new version, it brings up, you'll get a, you need a dialogue again because it's a version comment dialogue. So you don't need to have versions of emails anyway, because each email is a separate file. And then obviously you might have a valid tag format defined so that it could find a match, but you've incorrectly formatted the save path in your rule. The best way to do there is to go back into the Ceph rule builder to check it again. But a good test in this situation is a drag and drop, and otherwise a trace file again. So a good example of that is I have a folder. I've already deliberately created one here for this area where you can see I've got a project ZZ. If you look at its URL structure, so this particular area, it looks perfectly fine. Its URL structure is perfectly fine. It sort of does conform to the number. I can see that by saying new email, insert tag, and if I go and pick that particular folder, project here, it says, yep, I can put a tag on that, no problem. However, when I try to save to that area, I'll just say colon. I'm going to send that email. But for some reason, when I go to this particular area or use that particular tag, what I'm finding is that the email, and there it is, it's just arrived. You'll see very quickly, instead of getting a yellow tag on it, it's going to get a blue tag saying it couldn't be filed. One of the best ways to check why that might be, other than going and looking at those things like permissions, but the first test should be just drag and drop the email. I just want to save it by a drag and drop, not by a rule. And when I do so, up came a dialogue. So that's exactly why. If you've got a dialogue here, then that's exactly why it won't be saving. So you've got to correct that problem first. In the case of things like the dialogues, it can be quite easy, because what we do with what I'd suggest is you go, sorry, not in my filing rules, go to options. You can go to your Office settings. And at the moment I'm saying prompt me when I've got any required or optional fields, but I can make that say, look, only prompt me if they're required, because that I happen to know that that field wasn't. So now if I was to drag and drop this email, it will no longer prompt for a dialogue, but I don't even need to do that because it's got a rule associated with it. I can just select the email, go back to here and say run filing rule, so rerun that rule. And now that I've addressed the condition that stopped it saving, it will automatically change to save to SharePoint, and my email will be here. So in the blue tag just suggests you've got to address one of a number of things that could be not allowing it to do the save. All right, we've used up a bit of that time. I think I've actually probably gone over. I apologise. So I'm going to quickly open up for any sort of question and answer before we close. And as I said, at the end, we'll send through this presentation and the video for people to reference. So was there any questions?
There are no questions in the chat yet, so okay. Whoever wants to ask something, just go ahead.
I will, while we're waiting for those questions, just to take this forward a little, I'll just, all right, so once we've done that troubleshooting, the last thing I wanted to mention here, in the presentation we send to, I've just given some samples of some common regular expressions we like to use. So the examples you saw, we've done some examples with certain number of characters. in the case of numbers, if you want to put a range in, so it's between 3 and 6. So there's a number of different formats you can use here. This is the sequence which we encourage you to use for representing any character except for a slash. And there's a good website to test and read up on your regular expression that we'll reference as well. Okay. But no questions? All right. Well then, look, there's a number of other resources available to you. There is some more information on MacroView at these links, or specifically on corporate email filing. You can go to our help centre. There's a lot of information, and you can download the Ceph rule builder as well. So that will be included in here. I mentioned this. There's a site on the web that I particularly like to use for understanding different regular expression formats, and the support at MacroView, obviously, if you have more extensive questions. So thank you very much for your. Sorry?
Someone is typing something, so maybe okay. It's a question. Let's see. No, it doesn't seem so.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time. Hopefully you found that useful. As I said, I know the latter part particularly was quite technical, but that's for people hopefully that have already been using it. But if you haven't been using it already, you can at least see the power in it and the different types of structure where it can be appropriate. And you can think about that in your structure design as well, even if you're not using Ceph yet. But if you're thinking you might want to be using it in the future, you can think about those design recommendations. So thank you.